Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how we study, because it's often not about how many hours you put in, but what you do with that time. We'll be looking at a simple, powerful cycle that can make your learning a whole lot more effective. Preview, work, and review.
So many of us think studying means just rereading the textbook, highlighting a bunch of sentences, or watching a video again. But I'm sure you've had that experience where you do all of that and you still don't feel ready. That's because real learning isn't just about putting your eyes on the page, it's about what your brain is actively doing with the information.
Okay, let's start with a really important word, recall. In your workbook, the first thing you'll see is a spot to define this in your own words. So, what is it? Well, recall is the act of bringing information back from your memory without looking at the answer. It's like pulling a fact out of your head, not just recognizing it on the page. Go ahead and pause here if you need to, and write down your own definition in your workbook. Now, this is a really important distinction to make. Recall is active. It's that feeling of quizzing yourself or trying to explain something out loud from memory. Recognition, on the other hand, is a bit more passive. It's when you see the answer and think, oh, right, I've seen that before. And here's the key. Building strong, lasting memory really comes from practicing recall.
How do we get better at recall? Well, the Storeylab Study Cycle offers a really simple loop to follow. Preview, then work, then review. This isn't about being perfect. It's about giving your brain a few smart passes at the material so it can actually hold on to what you're learning.
All right, let's break this down, starting with step 1, preview. This is something you do before you really start studying or even before a class begins. Think of it like creating a map for your brain.
A preview isn't a deep study session, not at all. It's just a short, intentional first look at the material. The goal is pretty simple. You're giving your brain a structure, a map, so that when the new information comes in, it has a place to go. And a preview can be super simple. We're talking about just skimming the headings in a chapter, looking at the example problems before you try your own, or even just taking 2 minutes to glance over your notes from the last class. It's a tiny investment of time that really pays off.
Okay, on to the next part of the cycle, work. This is the phase that most people would call studying or doing schoolwork. This is the main event.
So work is the time when you are actively using your brain. You're solving problems, you're writing, you're discussing ideas. A strong work session means you're really engaged, not just passively taking notes. And here are some good examples of what that looks like. Work isn't just listening to a lecture. It's actually trying the practice problems yourself, filling out a graphic organizer with your own words, writing a paragraph, or contributing to a discussion. It's all about doing, not just observing.
And that brings us to the third, and I'd say most important part of the cycle, review. This is the step that really makes the learning stick, but it's also the one that's easiest to skip.
A review is just a quick check-in that you do after a class or a study session to lock in what you just learned. This is the step that moves information from short-term memory, that feeling of, I think I heard that, to long-term memory, where you can actually use it later. A review doesn't need to be this big, long thing. It can be as simple as summarizing the main points of a lesson in 3 sentences, or maybe reworking one problem you got wrong, or even just explaining the main idea out loud to yourself. These small actions make a huge difference for your memory. So, that's the cycle. Now let's talk about the opposite of the cycle, taking shortcuts. You know what I mean, copying answers, cramming everything the night before a test, just skimming the reading. In the moment, they feel so efficient, don't they? So, what's the real problem?
Here's the core issue. Shortcuts build what we call shallow exposure, not real understanding. They create the illusion that you're learning. And this is exactly why a test or an essay can feel like a total surprise, even if you technically studied. You've been exposed to the material, but your brain hasn't gone through the cycles it needs to really grab onto.
Now, let's be realistic. Emergencies happen. There are going to be weeks where life is just heavy, and you might need a shortcut just to get by. That's understandable. The real problem isn't the occasional emergency. It's when those shortcuts become your regular habit, day in and day out, all while you're telling yourself, I'm studying. That's when the stress really starts to pile up.
All right, let's take this from an idea and make it practical. If you look at the Apply It section of your workbook, we're going to build a cycle for one of your actual classes.
First step, just pick one class, maybe math, history, science, whatever you want to focus on. Then write down one simple, realistic example for each part of the cycle in that class. So for math, a preview might just be looking at the example problems before starting the homework. The work would be doing the problems. Go ahead and pause the explainer right here to fill out those first 2 steps in your workbook.
Okay, welcome back. Now for step 3, let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. Which part of the cycle do you usually skip? For a lot of people, it's review. For others, it's preview. Go ahead and circle it. Then, just write down one small, achievable way you could add that part back into your routine. Feel free to pause again to fill that in.
Next up, let's tackle a shortcut. In step 4, think of one shortcut you tend to use when you're busy or stressed. Maybe it's copying homework. Maybe it's cramming. Then, think about which part of the cycle is missing when you do that. And finally, write down a simple, realistic replacement. It doesn't have to be a huge change, just one small move to add a piece of the cycle back in. Go ahead and pause now to complete step 4.
Now at the bottom of the page, there's a quick check. Think about this. When you skip the study cycle, do you find yourself drifting and avoiding things, or do you go into overdrive and start cramming? Then, what's a sign for you of shallow exposure? Maybe it's recognizing a term but not being able to explain it. And finally, what's one simple move to get back in the cycle? Take a moment to think about that.
So, to wrap everything up, let's go over the big takeaways. The study cycle is a simple loop. Preview, work, review. Preview is all about giving your brain a map. Work is when you're actively learning. And review is what makes that learning stick. And remember, shortcuts might feel faster, but they only create shallow exposure, not real understanding.
If you haven't done so already, please take a moment now to finish the entire Lesson 3.4 page in your workbook.
We're going to build on this and talk about how to create really intense, effective focus sessions. We'll even look at when tools like the Pomodoro technique can help you and when they can actually get in the way. Thank you for your time and focus today.